gets me out the door. All right, good morning. Glad to be here in Mitchell County, Iowa. I'm going to show you where I'm from, which is not that far away from where you guys are right here. So, my name is Kartes. I work for Butte, Ag. I live in Butte, Minnesota, which is just up the road a little ways. And we've been working the cover crop business since 2012. I went to work for Butte Ag in 2014 and set Dean and Rachel and Josh up as dealers for me. And they've been a really great source of seed movement down here and knowledge. And I love that we have this big a crowd here. So what I'm going to talk a little more about today is some of the seeds that we use in these cover crop mixes and why we do what we do, and how we add more into these mixes than just using rye or oats or trip. So I grew up in Butte, Minnesota, like I said. I worked on my home farm with my uncle. The joke always was I lived on one side of the road and he and my grandmother lived on the other side of the road, and I would learn everything from my folks, and I learned everything good from their side of the road. So I learned how to run machinery, maintenance machinery, and farm. The crazy part about him was, in 1976, everybody's moldboard plowing, and he went to a chisel plow. And the neighborhood said, "You'll go broke." And in 1982, we bought a bigger chisel plow, and they said, "You're going to go broke." And then in 1984, we bought a plow, and they said, "See, you had to go back to plowing." Well, we had a couple of really steep clay hills, and if we chisel plowed at an angle, we made big rain gutters and washed all the residue down worse than we were doing with moldboard plowing. So we listened to Francis Child, who took the covering boards off and flipped this ground straight up in the air. It did help, but we still had erosion problems. In 1987, he went to ridge till. "You're going to go broke." You know, that was the consensus in the neighborhood, he's going to go broke. Because every time we made a practice change, it wasn't what the neighborhood did. So in 2012, we started working with cover crops. 2015 went to 100% no-till with covers. You're going to go broke. In 2017, he had the third crop, going to go broke. He's 73 or 74 years old, and he just bought 150 acres and paid cash, because obviously he hasn't gone broke. So when everybody tells you you're going to do these practices and go broke, it doesn't mean you're going to go broke. It just means that you're doing something different than the neighborhood's doing. Well, I learned a lot from him on just have thick skin. So here's Steele County, where I grew up. I grew up right down that corner. So we're in the Quad County area. We're the top of the Cedar River watershed. Just outside of town, you can step over it. You can't do that down here, it's a little wider, unless you got a good jump. And I'm about 4 biscuits away from jumping anywhere in my lifetime. So I'm not jumping anywhere, that's the end of that. So it's a lot wider down here. But all the water starts up there and comes down. The other thing is right over here in Steele County is the start of the strait, which is part of the Cannon River watershed, which is almost 1 million acres. Once again, we're the start of the water. North of us is the Mississippi, that's the start of a lot of water. And to the west over here is the start of the Des Moines. Once again, a lot of water moving into the Mississippi, going down the stream to the Gulf, with all of our soil, all of our fertility, all of our herbicides, making the epoxy zone bigger. How do we start to prevent that? We start to work with reduced tillage, strip till, cover crops, no-till, and work up the ladder. So when we first start out, a lot of times we're doing this, we're always just adding cereal rock. It's a great starting point. But as we get farther in this, we want to see more diversity in these mixes. And how do we get that done? And we're going to talk a little bit more about why we add this diversity to it. So who is Butte Ag? I always talk about this a little bit so everybody kind of has an idea of where we're at. Butte Ag is in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. They operate a 7,000 acre cash crop farm. They raise all of our grasses, brassicas, they're part of the legumes. We contract with other growers in the valley. Our farm, except for clover production, is 100% no-till. In the Willamette Valley, that is odd, because they are big tillage people. They'll till stuff 12, 14 times before they plant. Obviously, they have a massive fuel allotment they need to get rid of that we don't have, because they do a lot of tillage. The only thing we cannot make work in 100% no-till is clover. Part of it is we get buried too deep. As a single species, it doesn't come up that well. It leaks out underneath the ground. We don't get a good catch that way. So we've had to do a light tillage pass from fescue or ryegrass into a clover. After that, it's back to 100% no-till. They do not bale any of their straw off the field, which is unusual for that area because most of them bale straw. They don't do any of that either. So you end up using 100% straw load. Their farms consume that residue so fast that by the next year the ground is bare because of the amount of worm activity, biological activity. They actually sell worms. You ever heard of that, selling worms? They don't have worm farms. They go out to the farm, they put a 4x4 wooden crate in the ground, push it down in, flood it, and the worms float to the surface. They have that many worms. Skim them off. They're fine selling worms. I want to see that done here. I want to see somebody start selling worms here. They have that good of biological activity and that many worms, they're going to sell worms. They sell them at Walmart, so people go fishing up in the Columbian River Basin. Crazy cash crop, but they sell worms. We run 2 cleaning plants in the valley. One thing about our system of cleaning, we have no hard chemistry at all. Everything is raw seed cleaned. Any treatment, any treated clovers or anything, goes to Smith Seeds. We use their treaters. They treat the product for us and send it back to us. We do not have any hard chemistry in our plants. Nothing. We don't even treat with biologicals. It's done somewhere else. Then there's a reason we do that, because of the laws and the rules and regulations. And then transporting raw seed is easier than coated. Coated, we need more paperwork with it, but they do the coating for us. We have 4 Midwest reps. I should have changed that. We're down to 2 Midwest reps. One of them retired and one of them quit. So I'm on this side of the river, my counterpart's on the other side of the river. So we cover a pretty wide swath. This is the Willamette Valley. Right north of Eugene is a little town called Shed. It's like if you went up in Minnesota and drove through Bixby, you wouldn't see it if you had blinked really hard. So it's right up there. It's where our plant is located, right along Highway 5 there. That valley raises 95% of the grass seed for the world. So that is what they raise. They do something on the farm every week or every month of the year. They're doing something. Right now they're baiting for slugs. Now I've done a lot of work in my lifetime, but their baiting for slugs is they drive around with a gator and find a slug spot or a vole spot, and they get out and they actually manually treat the hole with a fungicide and a herbicide type of deal to control grass that comes around it also. They run 7,000 acres and they drive around and do this on every acre. Those guys really like to drive that gator. That's what I can figure out, because that sounds like a really stinky job to do. So what do we use for cover crops? So let's talk about these. We're going to go brassicas, grasses, and legumes. We're going to start with the brassicas. The brassicas are something that I think we really need to start working more into the system. And the biggest thing with brassicas is, when the farther north we go, we hear this all the time, well, you don't have enough time to make these work. Yes, we do. We can get them applied, aerial, high clearance. Dean and his group does a lot with aerial. That's a good way to get it applied. Most of them don't overwinter. Except rapeseed will sneak by us once in a while and overwinter. And now we're working with winter camelina. And winter camelina is designed to overwinter. And I think there's great attributes of getting more things to overwinter for us in front of corn, beans, either one. Just so when you do this, you have the plan of how you're going to terminate that the next spring. Because canola, which is glyphosate resistant, is not dwarfistic rape that we sell. That is glyphosate resistant because it's a waxy coated plant. So it's not because it's Roundup resistant, it's just naturally has a coating on it that glyphosate can't get in. So any kind of 2,4-D, any kind of broadleaf killer will take care of rapeseed overwintering. And out of a standard rapeseed, if you put 1 or 2 pounds out there, you'll have a pound over winter. Seems like we always have some rapeseed overwintering. Is it supposed to overwinter? No, but it does, which is bonus for us because it did. Now we just got to get rid of it. So rapeseed is one, and we'll go through more of the brassicas here. But the brassicas are where we're going to start. And the reason we're going to start there is, I think that's something in these mixes going forwards, especially when we're trying to scavenge up more nutrients, we need to get the brassicas out there. All right, so out of this picture, and I like to be interactive, which one doesn't belong in this picture? Don't strain yourselves, but, oh, what do I do here? Look at that, I just jumped way ahead, Dean, I just took off on you. Which one doesn't belong here? One right in the center. That's buttonweed. So this was taken by Austin, Minnesota. All right? This was a big, massive cocktail mix after canning peas. So like small grains, we can get a big, massive mix in. This stuff got really big. This buttonweed was in the corner where there was no cover crop growing. What does this tell you? Mother Nature loves brassicas. She put it there. We didn't put it there. It wasn't in the seed. Did not come from the canning or from the cover crop seed. Any way, shape, or form. There's no buttonweed in there. Guaranteed. We have tests. Trust me. We have tests. A lot of tests. Piles of tests. No buttonweed. Mother Nature put it there. Why? She wanted a brassica to there. And I figured out one thing. I've been married for 34 years. And I've learned one thing in 34 years. My wife is always right. Even when she's dead ass wrong. She is always right. And it makes my life a lot simpler Once I learned that and just agreed and said, yes, honey, you're right, and turned around and looked at the kid and said, she's not right, but just don't make her mad. Because she's half Czech, and those people have a little bit of a temper. So you don't, and she's a meat cutter, or she used to be. All those combinations cannot be good for big me. Because I don't run very fast anymore, and she's like 95 pounds and pretty agile. And I said in a meeting one time, I said, if I hear her sharpening knives, I get scared. And she looked at the lady next to her and she goes, he thinks I'd sharpen them. She goes, I would dull him. He's not getting off that easy. Ooh. Now go to bed with that at night. Make sure you never make anybody mad. So Mother Nature's a woman. She wants to be nurtured. She wants to have crops growing. She wants to see brassicas. So we put them out in the canning after small grains, even in corn and soy rotation. We can make brassicas work. Will they get this big? No. But they'll get this big. That tuber really sets you apart from what a brassica look like later seeded. Is that a sufficient tuber? What's everybody think? Absolutely. It doesn't need to be any bigger. It doesn't need to be this. This is very excessive of a tuber. The other part is, radishes are fine. Don't get me wrong, we sell a lot of radishes, they got it to place. They're the rock star, everybody knows about the radish. Tillage radish, radish. Turnips have a place. Mustard, rapeseed, and kale, to me, really have one of the best places because of that root network underneath. It doesn't push the tuber out of the ground like radishes do. What happens when you break this tuber off if you're grazing them, or if you're running machinery and you seeded them and then poke that tuber out? What happens? You break it off, they're dead, they're gone, they stink like natural gas leaking if you have too many of them out there. We have had towns almost get evacuated because they thought it was a natural gas leak and all those was rotting radishes. The other part is, if you're grazing cattle on radishes and you have milk cows, don't do that. I got the privilege of drinking radish-tainted milk in Wisconsin. The millennials are ready for a lot of craft brews and stuff like that. Nobody's ready for that. I went to this dairy, the guy put it in front of me and says, drink this. And I said, I'm not really thirsty. He goes, wasn't an option, sunshine. He said, drink this. I got it to my nose and realized there was something wrong with this milk. I took a drink and wow, it was bad. And he said, what do we do now? What happened? Well, he had a pretty good sized herd. He'd put radishes in after a small grain, 3 pounds per acre, which is way too much, and started grazing the Guernseys, which he had 100 of them in this herd, for the butter fat. And it tainted the milk out of the tank like radish. The creamery dumped, I think, for about 3-4 days. They finally got it regulated and worked out. He was not in the mood for question and answer. I said, well, maybe we should make radish-tainted cheese, radish-flavored cheese. And he said, I'm not asking for a solution. I said, I'm asking what you're going to do about this. Okay, well, we took care of it. Anyways, but we just realized one thing. Do not graze dairy cattle on radishes because bad things can happen. We learned that really quick. The rest of the stuff you can graze and it's fine. But not if you have dairy cattle. Don't do that. So like I said, we don't need to make them this big. We need to make them this big. The other part is size and how long they live in the ground. All right, so you take kale, 200,000, 175,000 seeds per pound. You take radishes and 35,000 seeds per pound. Rape seeds, 157,000 seeds per pound. Turnips are 200,000 seeds per pound. Not everything's created equal in the world, right? So if you say you're putting a pound of something out there, it's a pound of what and how many seeds per pound is it? So you start flying on early September, late August, early September, high clearance, whatever, and you're putting a pound or two of radish out there, that's fine. You can put a pound of kale and get way more bang for your buck out of a pound of kale for price-wise. So I really like the kale. The other part is, kale lives for 14 degrees for 20 hours. When was that this year? A couple weeks ago? 1st of January finally got cold. We had pictures of kale still green with white roots growing in December. What's that doing for you? Putting carbon in the soil. Constantly plowing carbon in the soil. Scavenging up nutrients. Our brassicas suck up a lot of NPK and micronutrients. We've done biomass testings on the top and found terrific amount of biomass nutrients, copper, sulfur, boron, manganese, zinc. It was brought up from the soil through the root network, put in the biomass. It's a low C/N ratio. it gives back to the next year's crop. We've done biomass samples of these mixes and seen terrific amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients in this when we have more than just one species growing out there. So that's why we like to get the brassicas involved. So if you're raising small grains for Dean or anybody, you've got a great opportunity to put multi-mixes together. If you're just doing after corn and beans, you're just a corn and bean producer, that's fine. Still try to get the kale out there early. Try to get African cabbage, dwarf Essex grape works really well. The turnips work well. Turnips we've had over winter in spots, and same with the rapeseed. So a half a pound of each one will cover NRCS with the right amount of cereal rye or of a cereal grain going forwards. If you don't want overwintering, oats, kale will live a long time in the fall. Barley, kale, and those kind of combinations. But get the brassicas in there, because that rooting network builds great structure. It's pollen carbon. It's a whole different microbiology climate that's living around that root over a cereal grain. Cereals are more fibrous. This is more of a taproot with laterals building your structure. I got a gentleman in Blooming Prairie that pours concrete at Yellowstone Farms, and he keeps talking about doing this. And I said, well, Keith, I said, it's like putting a rebar in cement. Do you do that? Yeah, it helps with the structure. I said, that's what these roots do too. It helps with your soil structure. As you build your structure, you carry your equipment better, you move nutrients better, you alleviate compaction. And this has a whole different biological package to live around besides cereal rise. So I think the brassicas are something we need to get into the mixes somehow. Okay, so we went over this slide, not all the same. Termination, if they overwinter, is something I wanted to get to here. What if they overwinter and you didn't plan on them overwintering? All of a sudden, here's rape in the spring. What do? Like I said, it's not going to die with glyphosate. No, I'm sorry. I should say terminate. It's not going to terminate because of glyphosate. It won't work. You need to use some kind of dicamba, Banville, 2,4-D, some kind of product like that will terminate it. Winter camelina is going to overwinter for you if you choose to use camelina. Broadleaf killer is going to take it out. Glyphosate will take it out, but I'd rather have you have the good package. If you're doing soybeans, and we had this happen this year. We had this happen. I was like when it's wheat. So we put a plan together for a grower. Yeah, winter rye, winter rye, and winter camelina. And somewhere along the line, somebody offered him a great non-GMO contract for soybeans. So we changed the plan, not knowing to this weed that we changed the plan, and we planted non-GMO beans. And his agronomist told him, which was 100% right, you can't spray 2,4-D before you plant beans. Well, label is 7 days. We were ridge tillers years ago. Remember me saying that? We sprayed a lot of 2,4-D before we planted beans, but we had to wait 7 days. That's labeling. Okay, so follow labeling. He didn't. Just use glyphosate. It did not take all of the camelina out. So now we have camelina and soybeans that are non-GMO beans growing. And we need to kill them. This is how the conversation went. I said, no, man, you changed the plan. We had a plan. You went and did something different without calling me. That's fine. It's his farm. I said, you're going to have to use like a Raptor, Cobra, something that's going to burn the crap out of your beans to kill this so you clean it up, because what if I let it grow? And I said, then you combine beans, there's some camelina in there, it ends up in the soybeans, the processor boots you out because it's a different oil seed. And I said, besides, if you sprayed it, we don't want a resistant product coming. So every time you spray something and it doesn't die completely, you're creating resistance. Don't want that. So I said, you need to get this cleaned up. So I used Cobra, one of them, smoked the beans, made them brown. They came out of it okay, got the camelina killed, so we're all good. But we had a plan in the fall, at application time, and the plan changed, and then we had to change what we did in the spring. So if you're going to even think about doing that, have the conversation with your chemical people. I'm not a chemical person. I know enough to be dangerous about chemicals. I'm not a chemical person. Talk to your chemical people and say, if I change, what's my options, and is it going to hurt my cash crop? One thing I always say when I present at these meetings, this is about a cash crop. This is how to amplify and make your cash crop better. We can, worry about the Cedar River, we can hug trees and kiss the ground and do all kinds of fun things out here, but you guys got to be profitable, because if you're not here, I'm not here, nobody has any business, and we start. So we got to be profitable. So everything we do in the cover crop side is to make your cash crop better and make you more resilient going forwards. All right, so let's talk legumes a little bit. So legumes are a great source of nitrogen. But I get frustrated with our books and our competitors' books when you start blatting about how much nitrogen you can get out of legumes. Legumes will produce a lot of nitrogen left all year. You can't plant something in Iowa or Minnesota in September and think you're going to get 200 pounds of N the next spring. I am not going to blow that sunshine up your hind end and say it's going to happen, because that is a bullshit story right there. I'm sorry. I said the language, I said it. It's not going to happen. But what is the legumes going to do for you? It's going to feed an entire different microclimate and microbiology around your soil. So it's going to feed nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which we want them alive. We want them to have a house. We want them to be fed all winter. So the next spring, they start mineralizing nitrogen back into your corn crop or bean crop. Because early season soybeans like nitrogen too. Any legume likes N in the beginning of its life cycle. So if it's feeding them, it's making your crop more resilient. Remember? Resilient, profit, more money. Everybody likes that. I love more money. I'd like a lot more money. I'd like to win the lottery someday so I could just do this all for fun. It's fun anyway, but I got to do it for a paycheck. So it'd be great if I just won the lottery and I could just travel all over and talk about this and tell everybody how to do it and have a farm at home because I have millions of dollars, which doesn't work out. So, but legumes are great. These are peas. Where do you use peas in your world down here? We use them in our world in southern Minnesota, northern Iowa after small grains. We have time to get them drilled and worked. Corn silage, if you're taking off the end of August and the first couple weeks of September, put in peas. They're not going to get huge, but you're going to get nice biomass growth. The top biomass has a lot of nitrogen early season. And then to nodulate, you need to grow them all year long, which you're not going to have time to do that. Not going to have time to do that. So get them planted. It gives a nice diverse mix after corn silage, small grains. If you do have canning acres down there, I know the canning companies float back and forth across the border sometimes. If you're raising peas for a canning company though, you can't put peas back in the mix. They get really sensitive about that because of phytophthora root rot. So if you're corn, soybeans, corn silage, small grains, peas are a great source. The other part with peas is you need 7 to 10 pounds to really get some decent benefit out of them because they're only about 2,200 to 3,300 seeds per pound. So they're very big seed. They can be planted. You cannot fly peas or broadcast peas out there. I'm sorry, I wish you could. You know, it's like soybeans. If you spill soybeans by a bin, they'll grow like crazy. You throw them on top of the soil in a farm and they don't grow at all. I don't know what that bin has to do with anything, but by God, every time you spill beans by a bin, they rot, they grow a hell of a crop. But you take them out to the field and spread them and they just lay there and don't do anything. It's one of those things in nature that you can't explain. So peas are a great source of nitrogen. It's a good legume to utilize as long as you have the right cropping system. This is red clover at full bud. Once again, clover is a terrific legume to use in our world down here after small grains. You can use this in the corn and soy part of it. You're going to get okay growth in the fall. You're going to get growth in the spring. It's not going to look like this. I guarantee you this. This is growing all year long. This is where you get all the nitrogen out of it. Clover is anywhere from, depends if it's coated or raw, anywhere from 230,000 seeds per pound up to 275,000 seeds per pound. So once again, you need, how many pounds of this do you need? I think sometimes we scrimp on clover because it's more expensive than like a pea, but we still need to get at least, excuse me, we still need to get at least 3 to 4 pounds of clover out there to get a sufficient stand. Now we've drilled clover in Minnesota the second week of September. We've drilled vetch until the end of September, even the first part of October, and got it out of the ground and it was fine the next year as long as we had some cereal grains around it to help protect it. This is a little more sensitive to depth. You can't plow this in 1.5 inches or 2 inches deep and think it's going to come up because it leaves out. But if you have it mixed with cereal grains, you can plant it at 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and it'll be fine. Peas the same way. If you plant them at 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch, you're going to be fine. You put them on the surface, it won't work. This can be blowing on the surface as long as 2 things happen. Number one, you get a little bit of moisture. Leaf drop and dew will make it grow. And the predators, leave it alone. My biggest issue when I have to go scout a field that didn't grow is when I find cereal rye and oats, and ryegrass, and legumes and brassicas, and all they do is nip the end off the seed. If they're going to eat it, eat it. just don't nip the end off and goof the germ up. You'd be like me, and I know none of you have eaten with me, Dean's eaten with me. I don't leave much food on my plate because I'm not going to starve. I'm sorry. I'm going to eat all my food. They put it in front of me, somebody made it, some chef or my lovely wife, and I'm going to eat it. And I shouldn't eat all of it because I'm the size I am, but I eat all of it. And I drink all the beer in front of you because there's no sense in wasting good product. Somebody made this, somebody raised it, there's no sense in getting rid of it. Legumes are great, but to say we're going to get a lot of nitrogen out of them is not really true. But what they're going to do is keep that nitrogen-fixing bacteria alive in the fall and in the spring, and it's going to start converting for your next year's crop. And that's what we want to see. Plus, it's plowing carbon in the soil. Notice I bring up carbon a lot. Do you know the best carbon market on the face of the earth is? Do you know what it is? You guys. You're your first carbon market. You can sell to whoever you want after that, but you are your first carbon market all the way around. You want every ounce of carbon for your soil to make your soil more resilient, to make you more profitable, to make your crop better. Carbon is the food source for the microbes. You've got to have carbon to make this work. So every time we're putting a different species, we're pulling more carbon in. This is crimson clover. This is about a little bit higher seed count. You're looking at about 80,000 seeds per pound. Crimson, when it blooms, gets this really pretty red bloom, but you've got to plant this by the 1st of August to get these blooms to come out, or they're not going to make it. They really aren't. So I like the idea of getting crimson and red together. We have had crimson over winter, like if it's protected by oats or something, it's not normally going to overwinter for us. It will red over winter, crimson won't. Peas, go back to, once again, has anybody heard of Austrian winter peas? Don't believe the name. Whoever named that should really be slapped because it does not overwinter for us in the upper Midwest. Now we're trying some experiment work of trying some different things on depth of planting, later timing of planting, and we've had an okay run with this. I don't like to talk about it yet because I want to see it a little bit more. It's done some things that we didn't think would happen, but it has. But it does not overwinter successfully. I know in Wisconsin, Aaron Silva has shown some really good results. They're growing a massive oats crop with it, and they're protecting it over the winter. And I think that's where they're getting it to work, is they're protecting from the wind, breaking the water molecules in the plant, and it overwinters for them. We would have to have a good catch of oats and rye to maybe get it over winter. I don't want to count on that. I wish we could, but I don't want to count on it. But it will grow way late into December, as long as it doesn't get really bitterly cold and we get wind on it. It'll keep growing. So we went over this. Okay, so let's look at some grasses now. This is cereal grain. This is winter rye. You guys all use this. This is very common practice for you down here. This is a really nice flowing on stand. We did this up by Dundas, Minnesota. And actually the guy ended up taking a rye cutting off it for forage. He didn't plan on it, but it came in so nice and thick. This is a terrific starting point. I always say you start with something you can control. So in the grass world, one thing you can control really easy is oats or cereal rye is really easy starting point. I've always said this since I've been doing these presentations. We bought my mother's house and moved down there, and she has these damn hosta plants around that house, and I can't stand hostas. And they live through, I tried to kill them with everything. I sprayed them, I put salt on them, I had the dog do things on them. I dug them up, they come up right next to where I dug them up. That and cereal rye will live through nuclear winter. I'm positive it's going to live there. And that hosta, whatever's in that hosta, I can't stand them things. They just drive me crazy. And she's got them everywhere. She had them planted everywhere in the yard. And they just won't die. I mean, I can't get rid of them. I've used some pretty nasty herbicides that I shouldn't use around my house just to see if I kill them, and they just come right back out of it. So they're resistant to everything. This is oats. And the reason I put this up here is you don't want your oats to get like this. You really don't, because this is a really high C/N ratio. The other bad thing that happened here, this was put in the second week of July in Minnesota. The guy was going to take a forage cutting off it, and he bailed out. These oats actually headed out by November. The next spring, we had oats coming back. They actually made some hard seed. We didn't really want that to happen. That was not the plan. Now, they no-till beans into it. They terminated it off. But once again, we had something growing that we didn't plan on growing, and then right away it was finger pointing, well, the co-op had something in the fertilizer, this and this and this. It's like, no, there was a little bit of hard seed there. It made hard seed, which we were shocked, but it did. We had guys try roller crimping rye up along Interstate 35 a few years ago, and we roller crimped rye, After the heads came out, the beans were growing. We did a 2-year experiment up there. We roller crimped this rye down. It did push it down. He came back through the herbicide to clean up what popped back up. The part we didn't realize is that head was out, and we thought, well, it's in soft dough. There's not many active kernels. And then we seeded the correct amount of trit and rye that next fall, and half that rye germinated that we crimped down, and we had like 4 times the rate of rye and trit the next year going in front of corn. The guy is very experienced. He got it killed. It wasn't that big an issue, but that's not what we had planned. So we tried to do something thinking we're making it better, and we almost made it worse. And if it had been a guy that wasn't really diligent on spraying and staying on top of things, we would have had a mess, because that corn would have really gotten beat up bad for the amount of rye that was out there. Because it, more grew back than I ever would, and we found the heads laying on the ground, and it was germinating coming out of it. And it's like, it's not fully matured. I said, well, I guess it doesn't really matter if it's fully matured or not. It's growing. So it grew. Not all of it, but enough to make a disaster. So like I said, you don't want your oats to get this big. If it does, start to get ready to head out, trim it back with a stalk chopper. I know it's another pass. It's great to mulch this stuff in. That mulch down the ground is huge. It's great biology food source, and it really keeps your cover crops actively stimulated to grow even harder. The other part is we had some cool seasons under here that did not come through as well as they should have. If we'd have trimmed this back, we'd have given them sunlight and they'd have come through. All these crops, when they're growing, need sunlight to photosynthesize. So when they're flying into corn, beans, we put these big mixes together. If you put the wrong rates of like brassicas in, it gets these big leaves on there and they shade everything else out. You can shade out the small grains, or you get too much small grains and you can actually compete with the clovers. So when we balance these mixes, we talk to our dealership network to try to make sure we balance these mixes to the best of our ability with the government money or whatever we're using to make sure we get a really good stand over this. And cereals can be terrific, but they can be also overpowering and dominant. This is sorghum sudan. So those are cool season grasses. These are warm season grasses. So where are you going to use that in your world down here? Once again, after small grain production, even after early corn silage. If you have some specialty soybeans that you're taking off into the August range, you can put sorghum sudan out here. This is actually a mix that's put in after small grains. They took a 4-H cutting off it. It had bursine clover and red clover underseeded. The bursine died after the cutting because it was getting cooler. The red came through, and they no-tilled corn in this the next year and had a great stand. But they put a 3-way mix out there, the idea of 4-H. The other part is all your summer grasses, or it's called C4 grasses, they're huge mycorrhizal fungi boost. So the whole time you have them growing, it's building up your mycorrhizal fungi in your soil. And your mycorrhizal fungi is this part that really feeds your plants the best. These and cereals do the same thing. Oats is a really high producer of it, or host to it, so is annual ryegrass. But this really will help out. So if you can get a third crop, like small grains, canning acres, get a C4 grass into your mix. It really does help. In the preventer plant year of 2013, I remember guys coming up to me at meetings going, God, I had like sorghum sudan or sudan grass in half the field. And that was the best corn the next year. Do you know why? Said, yeah, the mycorrhizal fungi. That's why. It really ramped it up and boosted that heavily. Oh, how do I do that? I said, you got to have a third crop so you grow it longer. I can't do it in corn and beans. Nope. It's just not long enough. Not unless you're getting something off really early. The other part is it's drought resistant as all get out. They raise this in Texas as a cash crop because they have no water to work with. So they harvest this. That's where most of the seeds raised is in Texas. Why? They have no water. This grows. So in our droughts of the summer, we can get this stuff to grow. We had guys over in the Winona area last year did rilage, and then some put corn in, and some bought 4-H sorghum or sorghum sudan for me. Some of that stuff lay in the ground for 20 days before it got any rain. The corn got knee high and was done. Just ran out of moisture. The sorghum sudan, we had guys calling saying, I'm making feed. It's up to my chest, it's up to my waist. I actually have 4-H. Right. Because it grew in a thimbleful of water. Why? Because it grows in a very dry, arid climate. So stuff we're doing here in the summer, we're running out of moisture, get this in the mix, it'll really help out. This is when it goes out of control. This is when you go vacation for 10 days and come back and think you're going to cut this and it's going to be at your knee or at your waist. Sorghum sudan and sudan waits for no man. Doesn't care you went on vacation. It just kept growing. He came back at one cutting and was done. He planned on a multi-cut. Now he got great tonnage, not quite his quality, but he comes back and he goes, I thought it'd be about my waist. He said, it's over my head. I said, this stuff grows a foot and a half a day during the heat. Especially when it's warm at night. This stuff just keeps growing. He got good feed, a lot of tonnage, but he was expecting 2 cuttings. Held manure and then he had bare soil. So we ended up going back in and putting oats and something in for him so he had cover the rest of the fall. He had planned on this growing longer into the fall and it didn't work. So if you're doing forage, you got to remember this. If you've got it in a mix, once again, this would be too heavy for a mix, but you don't want it to get this big. If it's starting to get really big and ranky, you can go back and trim it back with a chopper or a mower or something like that. Okay, so a lot of times when we do these government programs, they get in that book and they find this product. It's called teff grass. Teff is a summer Ethiopian grass. Okay, Ethiopia, Africa. Dry, arid climate, very warm, grows on a thimbleful of water. It is not a crop to seed in Iowa in August or September and think you're going to get growth. It takes 10 days to come out of the ground. It needs a lot of heat, daytime and nighttime to grow. So you're not going to get anything. It's a high seed count, so it works really good for some of these CSP contracts. You're not going to get growth out of it. I argue with a couple of people down here in Minnesota, they're like, let's use teff. I said, do they have small grains? No. Then no, teff is not something to use. Teff planted alone is the antichrist to soil health. You need to work the ground. You need to roll it like a brick. So literally it's this hard. Then you blow it on top and take a dimple roller and tamp it in. It is the worst thing for the soil I've ever seen when you're working it up. After you grow it, it's got the most beautiful fibrous root network and clings that soil back together. It's just great. It will make tons of dry feed during the summer. It grows on a thimbleful of water. And the other thing is the sorghum sedans, any of the summer grasses, this is one of them, are luxury consumers of nitrogen. So we talk about around these rivers and we're trying to suck up a lot of N. If you have the ability to put in a summer forage or a summer cover crop mix, make sure you get a C4 grass. Don't put this in a multi-mix because you will not find it. It hates competition. We put it with Berseem clover, and the first cutting it thrived over the clover, the second cutting the Berseem got ahead of it, and it smothered it out. It does not like competition. All summer grasses need 70 pounds of nitrogen at planting, 50 to 60 pounds in every time you cut it. You'll increase your protein by 2-3 points in tonnage. If you don't do that, you're going to get moderate tonnage and average protein, which if that's what you want, that's fine, but you won't get what you could get out of it. So in a situation where it's rotation with corn and beans, this will scavenge up a lot of nitrogen and hold it. Any species can eat this. This was in 2013, the preventative plant year. These guys planted this because they went down to Tennessee the year before and bought 250 calves. And when the truck showed up, the cows came with them because the guy was going to terminate them. So he said, just put them on the trucks and send them to them. So they went from being guys who are going to finish out 250 calves to being 500 head cattle farmers. And they weren't really prepared for any of that. They had no feed ready. So they bought corn silage during the winter from the canning companies and they survived. And then in 2013, they're going to raise corn silage, and we had 18 inches of snow on May 2nd, and it screwed that whole plant up for them. So they're calling me saying, so we got cows and calves, and they're bred again, so we're going to have more calves, what do we feed them? So we did 400 acres of teff grass. I said, here's the tonnage you're going to get. They did the first 40, and he called me and goes, you're a liar. I said, why? Well, we only got this many bales. I said, you weigh one yet? No. I said, how big a bale did you make? Well, 5 by 6. That's what the baler made. I said, really? I said, go weigh one. So he called about an hour later, he goes, well, we tried to lift it with the skid loader, John Deere skid loader, and the back end came up. So we went and got the payloader, and they weighed about 4,600 pounds apiece. I said, what do you think? You want to make a little smaller bale? And he goes, wow, you're right, that stuff really packs in. I said, yes, it really does. So I said, how about we cut that bale size down a little bit? And he goes, yeah, the skid loader's not going to work. We got to use the payloader all the time. Well, I mean, it made a lot of feed. The other part, when they fed this, the cattle would push the bunk out of the way and lick the ground underneath to get every ounce of this. This is the most palatable, digestible stuff I've ever seen in my life. So it really is a great summer forage done right. You can't no-till drill it. You'll get it too deep. It wants to be just tapped underneath the surface with nitrogen and moisture. But it sucks up a lot of N too. So I mean, it's a really great crop used the right way. Okay, now we're going to have the big conversation of annual ryegrass versus cereal rye. Okay, this is where confusion really sets in a lot of times. So I always tell the story when I was down at the Des Moines show the first year. The guy came up to me and he was down by Leon, Iowa, down in that area, and he said he went to his his retailer, and he didn't say who it was, it didn't matter. And he got a government contract and he said he needed rye. So they opened up the book, and of course A comes before C or W, so he came to annual ryegrass. Oh, this must be the same stuff. Annual ryegrass is 175,000 seeds per pound. Cereal rye is 16 to 18,000 seeds per pound, and they seeded 80 pounds. So what do you think they had? I mean, most golf courses are seeded at 40 pounds of grass seed, and they're excessive. This was the most beautiful lush hill I've ever seen in my life. It was just thick and great. He says, "Can I work it?" And I said, "With what?" "You gotta plow it. You have to plow this, and he's highly erodible, can't do it." So what do? He ended up taking a 4-inch cutting off it. He planted beans, he rolled it shut, they sprayed the mother load of glyphosate twice, got it cleaned up. It worked, but it wasn't the right crop. So annual ryegrass is a true grass. It's like lawn grass is what it is. So it's a bunch grass. It grows in the spring, it grows in the fall. It doesn't grow during the winter or during the summer. At 85 degrees, it shuts down. So we use this as early interseeding, B2, B3 seeding. That's what this is here. This is the next spring. Well, the right picture is the fall. This is the fall. This is the spring. Same fields are about a mile apart. This is the fall. You can see the brassicas in this mix yet. This is just, the only thing that overwintered was the annual ryegrass. Our annual ryegrass has successfully overwintered several years for us. Not every winter, but when we seed it early in that B2, B3 range, it does overwinter. Why do we do that? We want to spread our workload out in the fall. We can't fly everything, we can't drill everything, so this gives us another opportunity. This is a 202 or 303 cover crop program here. I don't like guys to start here. And down here in Iowa, there was a few years ago, there was a whole group started called the Iowa Interseed, and they built interseeders, and everybody's going to do this. And it really didn't work as well as they'd hoped. Part of it was, if you don't have the right herbicides on your field, if you're using a lot of atrazine, a lot of these long-tailed residuals, you're going to take the ryegrass out. It doesn't take much herbicide. The other part is, if you're using a very aggressive bean herbicide the year before, like a Sonic or something, it's a 24-month window back to annual ryegrass there. So we dinged a lot of it. It didn't work quite right. Where we got it to work so well is, like I said, my uncle's a ridge tiller, so we've been banning chemicals for years. So in between the rows that we never moved, we didn't have a lot of herbicide built up. So we could make this work. So we seeded 18 pounds of ryegrass, a pound of kale, and a pound of turnips. And it worked. And it worked well. Until we added small grains in the rotation. And then we had to quit doing it because we didn't get it terminated from the corn to the beans as well as we should, or from the beans to the small grains like we should have. We had ryegrass come back. It polluted some of our oats. We couldn't get it out. I buy the oats back for seed. The stuff that had the ryegrass in it we used, and I told the guys we're using it for. I said, this has got some ryegrass in it. It could overwinter. Here's how we got to take care of it. So we didn't terminate it correctly. So it got to be a weed. It wasn't a cover crop anymore. It's a great cover crop to use in a corn and soy rotation because it does break up using just cereal rye all the time. This stuff will root 70, 80, 100 inches down. It will get around tile lines. It could build up a spot in a tile line to plug it. We haven't seen the ryegrass roots as much as we've seen other roots in tile lines. Do tile lines get plugged by cover crops? Absolutely. We've usually found a poor connection, a crimped line. We actually sent a DNA sample in one time. A guy was just furious at me. It was all my cover crops fault, so we sent a DNA sample in down to Ames. They did the DNA sample and found out it was corn roots and wheat roots, and he had wheat there for 25 years. It wasn't my cover crop because we had rye and turnips, so it wasn't that, but it was wheat and corn, and he never did forgive me or thank me for anything. He just says, wow, still it'd be the cover crop's fault that got there. Absolutely. 25 years later, it finally pushed it down into the tile lines. That's what happened. So this is a great one. Overwinters, and you can kill it. It does die as long as you follow guidelines. Between 9 and 3 spraying, make sure your solution is buffered, not just the water, the solution. You make sure you use a full rate of glyphosate on it. Some guys use some additives to it. I've had some guys spray accent on it, put some other grass killers in it. It will die. But it's got to get through the top part into the biomass, into the root network to kill it, or it'll spring up right next to it. Do not use a lot of 32% as a carrier, because all you do is burn the foliage off, it doesn't get in the roots, and it comes right back up. Then it's mad. Mad ryegrass or mad cereal rye is like your wife being mad. You might not live to see the daylights. I might not if I make her mad, because once again, she's going to cut her up. She just cut me up. So we do not want to make cover crops mad. We want them to terminate out. That's the end of mine. Got any questions now? I can answer some. We got some time yet, Rachel?
Yep.
How much time do we have?
15.
Wow, look it up. You know, that doesn't happen very often. I cut 10 slides out of this. I probably should have put them back in. I wanted to make sure I had enough time. Is there any questions? Go ahead.
Are the rye,
Oh, don't do that.
they're gonna come back now with the warm weather, and then what happens with the
That's a good question. We've been asked that a lot in the last 2 weeks. The question is, how many people have seen the rye greening up? Absolutely, right? And it really looks nice. It's really coming. Rye will go into dormancy 3 times, in and out of dormancy 3 times. After its 3rd break of dormancy, it'll put a seed head on it. So how many times does it break dormancy? I don't know. And just because it greened up does not mean it's completely out of dormancy. These plants will green up a little bit when they start taking in some carbon. Doesn't mean they're completely out of dormancy. But if it does it 3 times, and we saw this in the last couple of years, we started really working. I work with a big Canadian firm that raises a lot of rye. So I asked them a lot of questions about rye production. And they said that what will happen is at some point the rye plant just says, all right, I'm done with it. I've got to be reproductive. So it goes reproductive. It'll do it 3 times. Now she said it's got to completely come out and grow for X number of days, and then go back into dormancy, and then come out and go back into dormancy. The bad part is after it's done that a few times, the plant gets more susceptible to wind damage. So like this spring, if we get really bitter cold winds blowing across and start breaking the water molecules inside of the plants, we could start to weed some of the rye out that way. If you're just raising it for a cover, you might lose half a stand. If you're raising it for seed, you lose half a stand. Now this becomes a whole different conversation. Do we keep it? Does it go to beans? What do we do here? So I'm optimistic that this will be the last warm spell for a while, and we're going to get cooler and stay like in the 30s, the 20s, the teens are fine. This 50 stuff is really wrong at this time of the year. The other bad thing that could happen is if we got a really heavy ice storm on it, and the ice laid on top and smothered it. We've had that happen like in low spots where we've had ice build up. So, or we get a really heavy wet snow like in March that gets it pushed down again, it's hard for it to come back up. So, you know, I think sometimes Mother Nature wants to see how many challenges she can throw at us before we break. And right now it's almost at that breaking point. So a couple more times coming out of dormancy, and then it's gonna be a crapshoot what happens. So I'm hoping this is the last warm spell we have for a little bit.
But what temperature do you look for dormancy?
To go out of dormancy or out of dormancy?
No, into dormancy.
Into dormancy, it's gotta get below 26 degrees to go fully dormant. And that's soil temps too. You gotta get your soils temp down to 20s. So we've done root pit digs where we've dug, you know, the top is crusted over, it's starting to get a little brown looking, and you dig down 2 feet and that root's bright white. That's still actively growing. That's not done. Just because the top mechanism for it to draw a lot of carbon in is starting to slow, the roots are still asking for it. So I think it's 26 is where the ground temperature's got to get to 26 where it just stops the roots or freezes, you know, starts to freeze that solid where the roots can't expirate anymore out of it. So and there's not much frost out right now. I just saw Tyler's, one of our Tylers in our neighborhood's moving tile equipment today. He said, we can get some pipe put in the ground. I'm like, great. This is not a good sign in February that they're out putting pipe in the ground. I mean, it's good for them because they're getting the work done, but that means it's way too warm in February. They should be pushing snow. They're usually snow removal guys. They should be pushing snow, not putting pipe in the ground. Anyone else got any questions? Go ahead.
What's your experience with drone seeding?
Drone seeding? So I could put some pictures up. We did 700 acres up by Dundas, Minnesota, which is towards the Twin Cities. The reason we did it up there was they have a lot of protected lakes, housing developments, and they really get ticked off about those planes flying like 6 in the morning. It really irritates those people who are sleeping in on Sunday. So we did a mix of, and it is kind of a goofy mix, we wanted to try this. We did 3 pounds of winter trip, 3 pounds of oats, 3 pounds of crimson clover, pound of kale, and a pound of camelina, and it qualified for NRCS flying. We did about 400 acres of that, and then we tweaked back and put some vetch in versus the crimson clover. We're trying to get more things from beans to corn with these drones. I think the drone places are going to be real simple. If you have areas that are like behind the trees or along the fence line or on the other side of the ditch, it's like a 5-acre piece, or headlands where the planes have a harder time getting to them, they do the best job they can. I mean, they can't slow down and fall out of the sky. They got to keep moving. I think these drones have great application in those areas. And then these higher legumes, higher brassica mixes, and very low grass. I think we'll try some annual ryegrass in these mixes now too. It's going to be a couple years of experiment and see where we're at. But the kale looks great right now. The camelina looks great. The crimson clover is probably half there. The oats, because it's such a low rate, it's a spear here and there, and the trit's the same way. We just wanted some overwintering grass with that winter treated kale. I think it's probably a waste. We should have just left it out. But that was about a 12-pound mix. And those guys can hold 120 pounds in those seeders now. And with battery life, you can do 10 acres, and then you had to land, put a battery, and put seed in and fly again. So I think we'll tweak this around and get mixes that will work through these drones. Man, there's a lot of them. We're at the Des Moines show. Dean came and worked it with me on Wednesday. 2 years ago, there was 2 drone companies, and there was 16 of them there this year. I mean, it's become everywhere you go, there's a drone right across from us. I mean, I hate when there's something like that across from me because everybody wants to go look at the toy. It's like, don't come over and talk to us and we'll show you how to use that toy. You got to get the seed from us before you can fly that drone. But I think drone will work. I think we'll work on some ideas and make it work. Do you have a question?
What can you say about quinopods?
What was that?
Quinopods? Have you ever heard?
Nope.
Okay. So I don't know a lot about it, so I'm asking. But it's along the lines of like a family brassica, grass, legume.
Combination?
Quinopod is like another.
Oh, it's all mixed together?
Well, no, it's another type of plant. No,
Where,
like
did you see it
amaranth-
on green covers?
Amaranth?
Palmer amaranth? Yeah.
It's something like that.
So red pigweed, Palmer amaranth, they're in the same families?
Yeah.
This would be in the same family
As, yes.
as oats?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard about that one.
Okay.
That's a new one. Thanks for stump the seed guy. There's a stump the seed guy. So we'll go forward. Landon. Okay, go ahead.
Repeat that question. He was asked-
Oh, he wanted to know about quinopods.
Quinopod.
Quinopods. I've never heard. Sometimes they don't privy me to everything coming off the development line because I'll talk about it too soon. So it might not be prepared to be out in the public yet. So maybe I can't. Where did you see that? Whose website?
Graham State, the nutrition farmer out of
Okay.
Australia.
Australia. See, okay, so Australia, I'll get to you, Landon, but Australia has a really interesting thing because they raise a lot of things there that we can't raise here. They also have a ryegrass in Australia that's naturally resistant to glyphosate that somebody brought into the south in the pasture projects and then harvested it for seed and sent it north. And it's that whole thing that Mason-Dixon line is still there. They like to whoop our ass from the south, I guarantee you. They'd still like to win. So they actually sent that ryegrass north, and it's naturally resistant to glyphosate. It came from Australia. All of our kale that we use comes from New Zealand. That's where that originated from because it's a major forage for it. We do buy vetch out of Australia because they have a line of vetch that's just fantastic. So because we're an international company, we actually can buy some of that stuff and bring it in. We bring a lot of vetch in from Hungary. Hungarosa vetch comes out of Hungary, and that's where it's actually raised and processed there in Hungary, and it's a really, really super winter hardy vetch for us. But we only get a couple containers at a time, so I've never been able to get a lot of it because it's always went over in Indiana, Ohio, and that area because they do so much of it. So that's a new one. I'll have to do some research on that one.
You mentioned changing the flavor profile of the milk. We had a neighbor bring over grass-fed beef this year, grazed them after oats on sorghum, sudan, radishes, and turnips, and they gained really well. They gained 3 pounds a day out just wandering around the field. But I was wondering, have you ever seen it change the flavor profile of the meat on grazed livestock?
That's always been a question. And the reason being is, when I went to the University of Minnesota, our beef teacher was grinding up minerals and different seasoning, and we fed a group of steers from 250 pounds all the way to finish with this mineral pack, and it had oregano and different seasonings in it. And when you ate the steak, you could taste it in the steak.
Don't they feed them beer in Japan?
Yeah, they feed them beer. Oh yeah, Wagyu meat has beer in it in Japan. Now, I don't care what you say. You can drink beer and eat beef. You don't have to feed it to the cattle. I think that's kind of a waste of beer, but that's my personal preference.
Jimmy Emmons,
Yep.
he's had experience with that. He's also reclassified his soils in Oklahoma using cover crops.
Yep.
But canopods in the United States typically are weeds,
Sure.
goosefoot, water
Right,
hemp.
yep.
So we don't
Right,
use them
big-
here, but they
yep.
use them in Australia.
So they raise things down there that they can feed or do for a certain reason. So, but yeah, so I keep thinking that we could probably do some of that. The only thing is when you change it to hamburger, it's all different. So when we had this project going in Waseca, we ground the steaks in a burger, and he had the McDonald's people come in, and we started grilling these burgers, and it stunk so bad in there you couldn't sit in that room anymore. And he just was not a happy professor after that because he'd stunk a lot of money into this. My wife, who was a meat cutter, said once you change that molecular with the fat ground into the meat, you change that whole seasoning profile and actually made it all like a rancid taste. But I think it'd be kind of neat if we grazed certain things and say this meat. So same with grazing chicory. If you have cattle and you put chicory in your mixes, chicory is a natural wormer for sheep and cattle. So if you actually graze chicory, which they do in the Willamette Valley, that's how they control it, is they graze it. They graze it out there, and they don't worm cattle and sheep anymore out there because they're grazing them on chicory. So I think if we looked at those natural ways of doing things, the way the American public wants to know all this, it'd be a marketing source for us to market things in different ways. So here's what we grazed these on, and here's the benefits. For you, we didn't use a toxic wormer. We grazed chicory, and it didn't put any toxicity into the cattle or whatever. So I mean, it's just kind of a side note. If you're big into cattle, chicories is something you should use. Any other questions? One more?
Is it fair to say, like with the warm season stuff in general, most of it's gonna do better on its own? Like, you're talking about the teff, for example, right? Or even sorghum sedan as opposed to making a mix?
So teff would be great on its own.
Yeah.
Sorghum sedans work really well in a cocktail mix.
It does.
So if you're just putting it out there so the question was, summer annuals, do they work better by themselves or in mixes? Teff grass, absolutely by itself. Anytime we try to put something with teff, it kind of goofs the teff up a little bit. When you take like sorghum sedan grasses, anything like that, they do partner well with like a brassica, like a pea. They work really well and they increase the protein. So if you're going to do a diverse mix, and I should have put a picture of a diverse mix up better, but we'll do something, we'll put like 3 pounds of sorghum sedan into a cocktail mix, or 5 pounds at the most. So we don't get it looking like that picture where the guy was taking forage. We want it to be there just enough to help with the fungi host. The other thing I've started to do is there's a study done out of Kansas by a guy down there that's saying we should feed BMR. We should use all BMR sorghum sedan in our cocktail mixes. BMR is brown midrib. It digests really easily for cattle. Soil is structured like a ruminant. There's goods and bads and all these things that are digesting. So as we add BMR into these mixes, we find the next year we don't find any of that lineant stalk left. It's all digested and broke down because it's an easier way for it to break down the soil. The BMR stuff is only running us 20, 30 cents a pound more, and you're only putting 2, 3, 4 pounds in there. So it's not breaking the bank by using BMR. So I like that. So in mixes, if you just want a really heavy forage, then go with a straight and go with less of the other components. But if you're doing a cocktail mix, they all work good together.
And then one, just quick, anything with buckwheat, have you ever done?
So buckwheat, I should have talked about that. I love buckwheat. Anytime you're doing anything in the summer, get buckwheat in the mix. It's a great phosphorus fixer. It's rapidly growing. It suppresses weeds. Well, the only thing you have to watch with buckwheat, if you're seeding it in July in our area, it's going to make hard seed by fall. And it's a gift that gives back the next spring because that's going to lay there. And then next spring when your corn's coming up, here comes all this buckwheat. So you can get rid of it. It's easy to terminate, but it will give back. I always tell everybody, I don't charge you for the regrowth on seed. That's all free on us. We don't charge you for that part of it. That's Dean and I don't charge Josh, Rachel. That's all free. You get that as a bonus plan. But it will be if it sets, and it'll set seed fast.
You need to drill it, right? Or get incorporated?
Yeah,
Not a fly
it doesn't fly with the crap. You know, you got to get seed to soil contact. The ones that fly good are the cereals. Fly decent. The brassicas fly decent. The ones that don't are any of your summer annuals, even like the sorghum sedans. they don't fly the best. You gotta get them in the soil. They do a lot better in the soil. If they lay on top, the thing is, there's all these predators out there. It's like a smorgasbord for them. I think they send cards out to people, make sure more come in. We done?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to kick you off the stage.
Jeepers. She's pretty tough to work with, I can tell you that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, TJ. And you know, we the luxury we have of also farming ourselves and using cover crops, Josh and Dean and I, is we're able to use a lot of these different species and try them out and see what works and what doesn't. And we'll tell you, we have had a lot of things that don't always work. That's where, you know, we pride ourselves on helping you come together with you and make a mix that works, either aerially or with a drill. Perfect examples of setting up for a big mix would be after a cereal crop, like TJ said. So we're here to help you if you are interested in different species. I know it can be very overwhelming with everything TJ went through.